Hello, and welcome back to Tune Up here on the War Corgi YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the attrition of war, and attrition just means the loss of resources. Throughout a normal game, you and your opponent are both going to be losing some of your resources, so let's jump right in and talk about what those resources might be. In the game of Legion, your resources expand to more than just your units. If you want to follow below, you also have your command tokens, which will represent the amount of activations that you'll have on your list. You'll have your units, of course. You'll have the command cards that you bring to the table and specific unique cards that you bring with your unique characters. You'll have the command bubble that your commander provides that helps in terms of panic, and then you'll have your battlefield cards. Now, each of these resources do contribute to helping you win the game, and they are all things that could be lost. These are all things that could fall victim to attrition, and that's why we're talking about them here today. Now, I know a lot of this goes without saying, but if you lose a unique commander, you're going to be unable to play the command cards that go with that unit, and you might also lose that command bubble that's keeping your troopers from panicking from having too many suppression tokens on them. If you lose the bid, you're not going to be able to play the cards that you wanted to play per se when it comes to providing the cards to the game. And this is going to become even more important as new objectives and new conditions are going to be released that will really affect the importance of what's brought to the table. And finally, as the game goes on, losing activations is always going to affect your ability to score objectives and defend objectives. And obviously with a game centered around victory points, that is the prime focus of the game. So attrition will affect all of these things and affect the strength behind your force. So obviously in game we want to try to make the choices that are going to affect our opponent's output far greater than our opponent is affecting our output. And so I below provided a common example of a way where attrition might not actually be equal. You'll see the ATST unit fighting a rebel trooper unit behind heavy cover, and it looks like the rebel trooper unit has lost 4 models, so the rebel trooper unit has taken 4 wounds. Now the attrition value here is that while the unit is not lost, while its ability to score is not lost, the rebel trooper unit has lost 4 black dice from its attacks. Its 5 black die attack went down to a 1 black die attack. But if you look over here, the ATST has taken just as much damage as the rebel trooper unit, but the ATST has not lost anything yet. In fact, the ATST doesn't lose anything until it takes 8 wounds, to which it becomes damaged. Now, if a game was to end with wounds on an ATST where it didn't cross into 8 damage, or it didn't hit 11 damage to take the ATST out, in more scenarios than not, those shots were wasted. You might justify an argument that you were taking the ATST's attention, and in some cases that might certainly be true, but I see a lot of newer players kind of change their mind mid-battle, which is great, and Legion definitely allows that, but those wounds placed on the ATST virtually meant nothing, where if those wounds were placed on a stormtrooper unit, that would be reducing die incoming. At least suppression would be passed out with wounds, which would result in the loss of actions from your opponent more times than not. And so when it comes to attrition, take the ATST for example, it's a good idea at the start of the game to see that resource, the ATST, and try to decide, am I going to be taking this unit down, or am I going to be ignoring this unit? Because the middle ground usually is going to result in the loss of a lot of efficiency and is really going to weaken the power of your army. For the final portion of this video, I just wanted to point out that the best way to reduce your opponent's resources is not always obvious. And I wanted to provide an example below just to see how sometimes it gets pretty complicated. Below, I have placed a Darth Vader unit with 2 wounds. I have placed 3 Stormtrooper units, all just with 1 DLT. Let's just assume the rest of their trooper units were shot down. I know it wouldn't make sense to split it up like that, but we're just taking an example. And then down below as well, I also have 3 Rebel Trooper units, and they all have a Z6. And so in this scenario, what would be the best route to take? You can use each of those rebel trooper units to shoot at a stormtrooper unit, and then any hits that go through the armor, it's going to at least take away a DLT, which is 2 red dice, which is a fantastic thing to take away from the stormtrooper unit, going down to just 1 white dice. On the other hand, you can take each of these rebel trooper units, who are going to average 3.5 hits per unit, and you're going to hit about 10.5 times. Darth Vader might reduce that down to 5, maybe 6, and maybe you have a 50-50 chance to finish off Darth Vader. So what would be the right choice there? Let's say Darth Vader hasn't played his command cards yet. How much does that influence the choice made? And so I just wanted to bring this example about just to show in-game you're faced with these difficult decisions all the time. And while you're thinking about what your opponent can do next, you want to think about the way to take away the most from your opponent in any given circumstance, without forgetting the fact that the game is really about the victory points. That's about going to do it for this video. We talked about attrition and what it is. We talked about the way that our resources are more than just our units. They're more abstract things such as activations and command bubbles. We talked about the way the game is impacted with the loss of those resources. We talked about ways that we want to make sure that you're making the choices that will cause our opponents to lose resources, such as with the ATST example. Then we talked about how the fun of the game is trying to figure out where those priorities are and what is the most important resource to take away from your opponent in order to score the objective. So next time we'll be talking about turn 0 and the way the setup of the game is very important and all the components that go into that. And hopefully I see you guys next time.